Hey y'all, Tyler again with another Congress video for y'all. This time I will be recording in SoCal. The bay's a lot better than this. Today's video is a little bit of a shorter one, but we will be building off of what we talked about last time in the block format. This time we'll be going over what a prerequisite is and also how you can add refutation into the block format. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get on into it. Now, we'll start with a little bit of a refresher of what we did on the last video. Last time we went over the block format and argumentation as a whole. In a typical Congress speech, you want to have an introduction, a status quo block, an outcome block, an impact block, and a conclusion block as well. But that left us with the question of, what happens if I'm not sponsoring the round? Obviously, I'm going to have to change my speech, add in some refutation, and adapt accordingly. Well, the way that you can adapt your speech starts with having what we call a prerequisite block, or a prereq for short. A prereq can be thought of as sort of like a half a block or a third of a block. It isn't a full thing that sort of exists, and honestly, it doesn't even need cards sometimes. But what it's really good for is being able to sort of act as like a roadmap for the rest of your speech in the round. Think of it like this. In other debate events like LD, PF, and policy, they have what's called an off-time roadmap. Essentially, before their time actually starts, they just tell the judges and their opponents what they'll be going over and where that they can do that. Congress doesn't have that same luxury. We only have 10 seconds to go up there, give a funny little pun about our last name, and ask if the judges are ready or not. This is why in the block format, we've built in something called a prerequisite block. Here is where you can essentially go over and summarize or simplify the clash that has happened in the round so far between both sides, affirmation and negation, or you can be a lot more simple with it and just talk about what the opposition has said, whether that opposition be the affirmation or the negation. Again, in the prerequisite block, you want to take time to classify what has happened so far. The easiest way you can think of this is summarize everything that has been talked about and then lay out your own framework or your own thesis for what your speech is about to cover. Let's go ahead and start with an example of universal pre-K. Now, in most universal pre-K debates, the affirmation will go ahead and go up there and say something like, universal pre-K should be implemented because pre-K has shown to raise test scores. Well, the negation often says, universal pre-K doesn't actually raise test scores, and if anything, it could be quite detrimental to a kid's development if it's rather underfunded. Based off of this information, let's look at a couple ways that we can form a prerequisite for a speech that we would be giving on the affirmation. Let's first start with the prereq that just addresses the opposition. Remember, keep in mind, I'm the affirmation of a legislation to establish universal pre-K, so I want to just go ahead and address what the negation is saying. I'd go ahead and deliver something like this. So far, every single speaker on the negation has made the central claim that there isn't proof that universal pre-K can improve test scores in the long term. First of all, I think that ignores a lot of the fundamental data and evidence that we found surrounding universal pre-K. We have seen results benefit children in the long term. But on top of that, I don't think that looking at test scores is the only way that the negation can argue that success is measured in this round. Let's look at other ways that we can measure the success of universal pre-K. Again, in this example here, I'm just going right after negation. I'm not really talking about too much of what's happened in the debate, and I'm directing to the point. I'm talking about the fact that I just disagree with the idea that the negation thinks that there's no benefit. I do think that there's some kind of benefit, but even if I don't think that there's some kind of benefit there, there's other things that we can look at to measure the success that kids have when it comes to universal pre-K. Now, let's try our second example. In this one, we are going to be incorporating more of a clash style, where we talk about what both sides have brought up in the round and where I stand or where I lie in terms of my analysis going forward. So far in today's debate, affirmation senators on my side have told you that pre-K will raise scores, while the negation has told you that scores will be lowered. I personally don't think that test scores are the only way that we measure whether pre-K is valuable or not. For many families, it is crucial that they have this free option to send their kids to, because beyond just benefiting these families, it will benefit the development of these kids for years to come. Things that can go beyond test scores. Now, in this example here, again, I'm incorporating a little bit of both sides. I'm still going off of this central idea that I think that preschool can be good beyond just looking at test scores and how children will prove academically, I'm sort of hinting and extending more into the idea that it's really good to have a free program, or it's even just important for the development of children in general to be in preschool or a program such as something like that, okay? Prereqs shouldn't really be overthought. It can be very easy. Like I said, just make it a quick summary of what's happened so far and state where you want to take this debate going forward. Either where you want to take your side, or even more simpler than that, where you are going to be taking your argument. Remember, treat this as a little bit of a teaser to your case. And the important part of a prerequisite is that you are framing your argument and you are framing the debate. You are giving me what is essentially like a thesis or a more grand overarching idea before going into more details about it when you are giving me your 3-minute speech. Now on to some refutations. The key to some really successful refutations in congressional debate is keeping everything in order, keeping everything concise, and making sure that you're addressing things that truly matter to your case and the round. First, it's important to prioritize refutations that actually interact with your case. If you did the block format correctly, like we talked about in our last video, your argument should naturally interact with the round. It should naturally be about the clash. It should naturally be about the action. So there isn't too much that you have to be doing in order to make your refutation very different, because you naturally should be talking about something, or at least defending something that is the central focus of what we're talking about in the debate so far. Now, refutations that you think of that aren't super interactive with either your case or the round and are just things that are generally wrong that you want to point out, those are things that should be kind of relegated either after your case or at the very top as something that you quickly deal with. These are what we called off-case refutations. The reason why they're off-case refutations is because, again, they're not really directly interacting with your case. You should focus on them when you have the time to do that, when you've gotten to everything that is considered necessary for your argument to make sense or be held up true in the round. Now, in my experience, it's always really beneficial to make sure that refutations are orderly, simplified, and not all over the place. I really find that it's beneficial to order refutations either right at the beginning of a block or right at the end of a block. The reason why this is the case is you can either have it at the beginning of the block, setting up your block as a bigger response to the refutation while also building ground for yourself, or you can go ahead and give your block and then you can say something along the lines of, that's why when Senator Blank tells you this, this, and this, that actually isn't true, where you are establishing reasons why the judge or the audience should believe you, and then you juxtapose that with what the other side has brought up, and then really show how your logic is something that honestly seems more solid while theirs is something that's a little bit more loose. Now, here's an example right here. This bill is all about phishing, and information is provided here in the status quo that will eventually refute the claim made by the negation. In the second example that I have here on a bill regarding carbon capture, a name drop is inserted at the top of the block, and the rest of the block is a response to what the affirmation brought up, or the rest of the block is a response, is the refutation, while it's also just building offense to your case as a whole. Alternatively, if you need to go a little bit more in depth into a refutation, or if you have a refutation that is like kind of related to your case, but more so it's about the larger round as a whole and what the round has discussed, use your prerequisite block as the place to have refutation. Again, if the prerequisite block is supposed to give you this greater sense of what's happened in the round and also a greater sense of what you want to focus on going forward, feel free to use that sort of section to say, hey, this is what's been talked about. I want to go ahead and address that before turning your attention to my argument or my other warrants as to why this is true, or these other pieces of evidence that I have to provide as why you should pass or fail this legislation. Don't be afraid to use your prerequisite to go more into depth into something that has been discussed before. That is exactly what the prerequisite is for. Also, don't have attachment issues. Feel free to let go of information that is unnecessary. Look, sometimes you might come up with a status quo that is either really overused, like maybe someone else brought it up in the round. Feel free to just cut out some of the information that you've brought up in your status quo or drop it entirely. Maybe you've come up with an outcome block that is honestly kind of similar to what's brought up before or doesn't have essential information, or you plan on running 2 impacts. Feel free to cut down on some of your case to leave more time for refutations to exist. Remember, It's really harmful to leave in something that's already been talked about, already been covered, when you have the opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into something that the judges really want to hear about or that the judges think matters a lot more. So feel free to let go, okay? It's not the biggest deal in the world. Maybe even letting go of a status quo would give you more time to do some in-round research and come up with cards that could be inserted into your prerequisite to make for a stronger piece of refutation. Lastly, the other thing to cover is know what kind of debate you're in, right? If you're in a status quo debate, naturally you'll have more refutation there, and naturally you'll spend more time on your status quo. If you're in an outcome debate, naturally you should have your refutations more centered around your outcome. You'll cut down on some status quo a little bit. Just know what kind of debate you're in and feel free to let go. Feel free to adapt. The worst thing that a Congress debater can do is be afraid to adapt to the round that at a certain point, their case doesn't really feel like something that matters or feels like something that interacts. If you want to execute refutations really efficiently and in a really good way, it's all about keeping in mind flexibility. Have the flexibility to change your prerequisite. Have the flexibility to talk about and interact with things that have been brought up. But also remember to keep things concise. You don't have to go in circles and keep on refuting an argument that's already been talked about. Introduce new warrants and do it in a way that is clear, that is cut, and a way that is just easy to process, but is not overwhelming. Remember, be efficient with the time that you have. All right, and that's it for today. Like I said, it's a pretty short video. Hopefully this was enough for you to process. In our next video, we'll be covering intros, conclusions, and rhetoric. My favorite, in a very in-depth way, so make sure to stay tuned for that. If you still have questions about refutation or if you have questions about prerequisites, go ahead and leave a comment or DM us at Ascend Speech. But more importantly, if you just want to interact with coaches a lot more, interact with community a lot more, go ahead and sign up for Ascend Academy. It is completely free to join. We hold 20 hours of free coaching every single month, and we have things like speaking drills, office hours, prerequisite work, or even prep drills, just so that you can get used to prepping in a better way, or so that you could ask trained professionals and coaches of the best way to integrate all of these things that we're talking about. Trust me, there's a lot more that you can get done in an hour than just watching however long this video may be. So go ahead, sign up for Ascend Academy. It's completely free. The link will be in the description. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to share this with others, like and subscribe. Let us know what more kind of content you'd like to be seeing from us, both on our YouTube and on our other social media channels. And I can't wait to see y'all next time. All right, bye-bye.